7 of House of the Dragon, Driftmark, was a bit of a slow burner compared to much of this season so far. However, that does not mean it's a bad thing. What we get was a well-defined character piece, centering around the fracturing family dynamic as Viserys tries to bridge the differences and hold it all together. Laenor's funeral was interesting. It's always cool to see how each house has their own customs when it comes to this kind of thing. Something I did not pick up on the first time I watched was Aemond, during the eulogy, was taking the opportunity to take a public but discreet dig at Rhaenyra's children by talking about the purity of their Valyrian blood and how it's of the sea. A lot of people were confused as to why Daemon laughed, seemingly randomly at this moment, but I think he's laughing at the absurdness that Aemond is using his own niece's funeral to take a dig at Rhaenyra and try to further his own position. The wake scene following the funeral was vital in setting the stage and tension for the rest of the episode. A lot happened in this scene, so I'll focus on the things that really jumped out at me. From the onset, there is tension in the air between Rhaenyra and Daemon. The acting here was top notch, how both managed to express their desire and repressed feelings with fleeting looks. For me, the highlight of this scene is just seeing the kids interacting. These last 2 episodes have been vital in establishing the characters before the next time jump. Now, I know making Helaena a dreamer is an interesting idea, however I am surprised how consumed she is by it. I do hope that after the time skip they do give her more personality than just I can see the future. We also have a nice little exchange between Aegon and Aemond about how Aegon's going to marry Helaena, with Aemond seemingly a little bit jealous of Aegon. The moment with Jace going over to comfort Rhaena and Baelor was a nice little touch, but what really stood out for me with this moment is how Aemond then goes to talk with Jace, but can't bring himself to interact with him. It really gets across the influence both sets of mothers seeping down into their children. I know I'm not the only one to point this out, but the lighting during the scenes on the beach between Rhaenyra and Daemon was very odd to say the least. It did not really look like nighttime at all, just everything seemed to have dark blue tint. Well, if my memory serves me right, it's because this scene was not shot at night, but during the daytime. The very first photos we got leaked online were taken from someone spying on the set with a long distance lens, was from this scene, of the 2 of them on the beach. So that is why these night shots look so odd. But if you look past this element at the scene itself, it was fantastic. Matt Smith and Emma Darcy really do have fantastic chemistry. I think what's so satisfying about the scene objectively is I know there was a lot of people waiting for a long time for Rhaenyra and Daemon to finally get together. So I think this scene worked well as a payoff to 7 episodes worth of build up. Aemond Claiming Vhagar is everything I wanted it to be. It was on my list of things I was most looking forward to seeing, and it did not disappoint. The sheer size of Vhagar is phenomenal. The fact you need to have a net system just to get up on her says it all. Aemond somehow gets across the nervousness of approaching a beast this size, but also the absolute balls of steel you have to possess to pull something like this off. Even for a Targaryen, claiming a dragon is a dangerous business, let alone an old, ill-tempered beast like Vhagar. In this scene, you truly get a sense of who Aemond is as a character. This moment defines who he will become. I also love the look Vhagar gives Aemond as he claims her. You can see that bond start to form. The sheer joy of Aemond figuring out how to fly was also great to watch. Having Baelor and Rhaena involved in the fight with Aemond was a great idea if you ask me, especially given the fact that Joffrey is way too young in the show's timeline to be involved at all. I know a lot of people have taken issue with how the fight goes down online, but all I would say is this, and this is how I approach it. Aemond, yes, was a bit of a dick in his choice of words towards Baelor and Rhaena about their dead mother. However, the girls did escalate the fight by striking first, with the whole thing then just escalating into sheer chaos, resulting in a 4-on-1 fight, Aemond somehow besting them, resulting in Luke pulling the knife and Aemond losing his eye. Let me just say this first. I agree with Viserys on this one. The whole fight was a ridiculous situation. Aemond shouldn't have insulted the girl's dead mother. The girl should not have attacked him. Aemond shouldn't have called Jace and Luke bastards. Luke shouldn't have had a knife to begin with. The whole situation, even in the book, is ridiculous, all fueled by the hatred instilled by the children's respected mothers. Saying that, the scene was fantastic and did exactly what it needed to do. Now, there's something I need to make my feelings on very clear, and this is the first time in my near 4 years of making videos, stuff I've read online has properly annoyed me to the point where I've logged off Twitter and Reddit for the last few days. The narrative being pushed, mostly by Rhaenyra fans, is that Aemond stole Vhagar from Rhaena, and they had no right to take her. I don't support the blacks, and I don't support the greens either. I like and dislike both sides equally, and I'm grown up enough to acknowledge that both sides do some very shady and horrific stuff to each other. So let me make this point very clear. Aemond did not steal Vhagar. Yes, her last rider was Rhaena's mother, but that does not automatically give Rhaena or anyone the right to a dragon. A dragon is not a pet, and a dragon is not property to be passed down or owned. For example, Daemon's dragon Caraxes was Rhaenys' father Aemon's dragon. So did Daemon steal Caraxes from Rhaenys? Rhaenys' own dragon, Meleys, was Alyssa Targaryen's dragon. Viserys' mother, did she steal Meleys from Viserys and Daemon? Just as much as claiming Vhagar was Aemond's choice, accepting him was Vhagar's choice too. A dragon bonds with whomever it chooses. Vhagar saw or sensed something about Aemond that made her like him and bond with him. Was it maybe not the best time to do this at Laenor's funeral? Probably not, but that does not change the fact Vhagar was not stolen. That Rhaena is not entitled to her like some kind of family heirloom to be passed down. Vhagar has free will and made her choice the same way Caraxes chose Daemon, and Meleys chose Rhaenys, or for example Dreamfire chose Helena. The scene post-fight in the hall was wonderful, with Paddy Constantine's Viserys, the glue that brought it all together. He managed to convey so many different emotions in a single scene. Anger, frustration, disappointment, sadness, and the realization that try as he might, the situation between his wife and daughter is never going to be fixed. It's funny because the kids do exactly what kids would do in the situation and lie through their teeth to make their own involvement in the fight seem less bad. Of course, both their mothers will believe and side with their own children. Now, oddly, despite my comments last week, I really did like Criston Cole in this episode, where it seemed even he has his limit. When Alicent orders him to take Luke's eye, he just looks at Sir Harold, and his face says it all. What the fuck do I do? I just loved his response to Alicent, that he's sworn to protect Alicent. So even he's aware that that doesn't extend to maiming a child. He only really gets involved when it all kicks off. I also find it funny that Daemon was just chilling in the background the whole time, reveling in the chaos that he's missed the last 10 years. My personal favourite bit of this scene comes from Aegon and Aemond. Poor Aegon getting the finger pointed at him yet again, when all the guy seemingly wants to do is just chill. I wonder if the whole Kingmaker plot from the books is going to be more of a vital part of the show and take up some more time. Book readers will get what I mean. But what I loved most was Aemond directly quoting himself from the book in regard to losing the eye but gaining a dragon. What people have to remember here is Otto is 100% right on this. Vhagar is a big win for the Greens. It's like being given a flying weapon of mass destruction and will have a huge impact on the story to come. Lastly, I should talk about Alicent trying to stab Rhaenyra. I think for me, this is going to be the show's Rubicon moment, where the two sides firm up and there's no chance of backtracking. And I think the kind of shot of both sides forming at the end, as the camera pans away, kind of implies that. I think Rhaenyra hit the nail on the head when it comes to Alicent's motivation and sheer resentment. Now they see you for what you are. Is a great line, but at the same time we also get to see how Alicent truly feels about Rhaenyra at this point. For me at least, I can kind of see why she feels the way she does. I think we come out this scene with both characters looking shitty, entitled children, but at the same time we understand them a lot more as people. Looking forward to see how this continues to develop. The change in Laenor's fate is something I'm very conflicted about. As of right now, I'm struggling to get behind it until we know how this change will play out down the line a bit. My biggest concern is the implication it has towards Adam and Alan of Hull. Specifically, if Laenor is alive, how does Adam claim sea smoke? I know others have suggested they create a new dragon, or he get Grey Ghost, but for me it just doesn't work as well. Adam claiming sea smoke almost viewed as proof within the story that he does in fact possess the blood of House Velaryon. I mean, there is another time jump to come, so maybe Laenor dies fighting for a free company or something, or it could just be one of those things they bury and hope no one remembers, which Game of Thrones did several times. One idea I had is, if you want to give Laenor a proper heroic death, is having come back early in the dance, being killed in battle, maybe at Duskendale or Rook's Rest. The theory doing the rounds right now, Laenor will actually be Adam of Hull. Somehow, this is really popular on Twitter and the r/House of the Dragon subreddit, when it's just, in my opinion, ridiculous and just makes no sense whatsoever. People saying, oh, Laenor will come back with a beard and call himself Adam. Do you really think his father would not see past that? Or, you know, anyone that he interacted with? And if we're doing that with Laenor, then what happens to Adam? Battle at Tumbleton just no longer works with Laenor as Adam. The whole fact Rhaenyra does not trust Adam because he's a bastard is vital to the plot. Him then having to prove his loyalty is a vital part of the story. Until we see how this plays out, I'm not going to judge the show harshly. I have a feeling Laenor will meet his fate in the end, but it will be more fitting of his character and the show. I just want to take this moment to address some comments I've also seen online about the changes that have been made and the implication towards the book. Some people, specifically on Twitter, have the idea in their head that the show is the canon version of the events from the book. No, the show is the show, the book is the book. The show is having to make creative choices in instances where events contradict, but that doesn't necessarily mean those choices are canon to the book. The whole idea of the show is the definitive canon version is just untrue, and I think from my research comes from a misquoted interview George R. R. Martin gave on the promo for the show, where a comment he made about making creative decisions for the show when the book contradicts has been misconstrued on Twitter as him saying that it's the canon events from the book, which I can kind of get kind of what it sounds like if you don't have the context of the rest of the interview, if that makes sense. I've also seen it bandied about that what does it matter if they change the book? It's just a history book written by biased sources. They can change what they like. The history could just be wrong. Now for me, you can tell who's actually read Fire and Blood and who hasn't from comments like this. Anyone who's read Fire and Blood knows it's a lot more than just a history book. Yes, it's written like one, but that does not mean there isn't some fantastic character moments or emotional story beats. It's very disingenuous to disregard it as just a history book. But this goes further. Some then go on to misrepresent the idea that there are conflicting sources and disregard the whole narrative the book presents. This is specifically an issue with this Laenor change. People are trying to argue that, oh well, maybe he just fakes his death in the book, but they got the history wrong. No, read the book before making baseless claims. Laenor is 100% dead in the books, killed in broad daylight in public with dozens of witnesses. He wasn't burned at all, and so his body could be positively identified. There is no dispute Laenor is dead. This isn't one of those cases in Fire and Blood where there are conflicting sources. Was Daemon involved? Well, that's another matter altogether, but I suspect he probably was. I don't normally like to rant about stuff like this in my videos. I usually try to be quite positive, but for some reason the blatant misrepresentation of what Fire and Blood is really vexed me. Now like I said, I'm willing to see how this change plays out before I make a firm judgment. However, there is one impact that is unavoidable if Laenor is not murdered. So far, I think the show has done an okay job at balancing out the argument when it comes to the blacks and the greens. I may not agree with those arguments, but I think they've done a decent job at showing them. In the book, you have Alicent being petty and low-key evil, asking for the eye of Luke. However, that action is balanced out a few pages later with the fact that Daemon most likely had Laenor killed to marry Rhaenyra, with Rhaenyra likely in on it as well. These evil actions kind of balance each other out. I feel the show is slowly losing that balance that they've tried to create, but let's see what happens over the next few weeks. Regardless, I expect most people will be very Team Black until a certain blood and cheese incident, at which point they will question the whole thing. Knowing people that have read Fire and Blood, that tends to be the journey people go on, and I did myself. The first time I read it, I was very much pro Rhaenyra, pro Team Black, until I got to Blood and Cheese where I hopped on Team Green. But then as the story carried on developing, I realised that both sides are just as awful as each other. They all do horrific and horrible things to each other, and I think that's what makes this such a compelling story. I love the Velaryon wedding scene, from the costumes to the blood ritual. It just fits Daemon and Rhaenyra so well. Any new Valyria lore we get is welcome, if you ask me. From what I've read in interviews, the symbols both Rhaenyra and Daemon drew on each other's head in blood are Valyrian symbols for the words fire and blood. There's nice little attention to detail moments such as that I love. If I can say one thing about House of the Dragon, it seems to be very consistent in its quality. Overall good dialogue, yes. We've had a few nonsensical moments, specifically episode 5 for me, but on balance I'm very surprised at how well it's going, and love the fact that general audiences seem to be loving the show. It's amazing to think it may have repaired some of the damage season 8 did, and that is saying a lot. However, for specifically this episode, I think an 8 out of 10 is a fair rating.